Well, thanks very much indeed. Welcome to the show. I am Jim Ferguson, and I'm joined with a very, very interesting guest. His name is Dale Richardson. Dale, welcome to the show, mate. How's it going?
I mean, that's all right. I'm in Canada or China, but I'm still here, so that's good. I'll call it a win.
China, gee. Well, look, welcome to the show. Welcome to the channel, and thank you for taking some time out of a busy, busy day, because I know that you've got a lot going on with you. And just for the sake of our audience, would you be good enough to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and whereabouts in Canada you're located?
Yeah, I'm a mechanical engineering technologist. I got a Bachelor of Technology majoring in engineering and applied sciences from Memorial University of Newfoundland. And I was doing research into HVAC infection controls, and I was actually asked to do some work for some dental clinics in North Battleford, Saskatchewan for the reopening procedures and uncovered a lot of issues with the implementation for their aerosol generating medical procedures guidance, which would actually, in fact, spread disease instead of mitigate it and do it in a manner that ran. So this is like a delivery system for biological weapons, and it's designed to look like a random outbreak. And so that's a huge no-no. And I also co-host the CARES project with my daughter, where we uncover a lot of, I mean, things that people don't like to hear, or the government doesn't like people to talk about, right? But the people need to hear. So yeah, that's really it.
Well, you're a busy guy. I got to say, I love your background screen there. That is super cool, and yeah, I really like to see that. So, you talked about China. Now, people might say, well, why is he saying that when it means Canada? Well, actually, you know that we've been following each other for a while now, and you'll know that I've often talked to people from Canada about the CCP, Communist Chinese Party influence, and there are big influences in Canada. I mean, really, it goes deep, doesn't it? But I mean, you've got some interesting research. You've been looking into this as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so when I looked into this, I looked at it and I understood that you could never implement this because the way they presented the guidance, and this is a very clever way of doing this because there's no obvious physical signs of sabotage and they actually get the people to implement it itself. So there's an efficiency to air mixing, and this was kept back, and it could actually change. Like, so they had a chart that they put up for settling times that came from the CDC. It gives you, say, X amount of time between patients based on your air exchanges per hour. But what it left out was the efficiency, which is nonsense. Nothing runs at 100% efficiency. We know that, right? But the issue is it could change the times on the chart by 10 times. So say you needed 10 minutes, but your air mixing was poor, you then actually had to multiply by five and needed 50 minutes. So you would put each successive patient in there into a potential infectious dose of whatever virus or pathogen it may be, COVID, whatever. And since we know that COVID was derived from gain of function, you create an effective spread for a pathogen, and out of gain of function, you're dead in the water. Like that's an act preparatory to levying war. That's high
Mm-hmm.
treason in Canada, and that's
Mm-hmm.
treason anywhere. You can't create something that an enemy can exploit to destroy you. And a biological weapon is still a weapon, right? So yeah, that's what we initiated the COVID response with.
Well, I mean, this is really deep stuff because there's a lot more coming out about the whole pandemic and the mandated, so-called mandated vaccines. They're actually, in a lot of people's opinions, a lot of top doctors, epidemiologists, professors that I've spoken to in Canada, as well as many other places, who are saying this was a biological weapon that was deployed against the human race. I mean, would you go as far as to say that, or am I getting stretching it a bit too far into one direction? What do you think of that deal?
No, you're 100% right. I actually was looking at a lot of the work with some doctors as well. And in some of the evidence packages that I prepared and petitions that I've done, I've got a lot of works from medical doctors and other people, professionals that come after the engineering controls, which was this first step. And everything that I've seen coming, starting with myself, the industrial hygienists, the medical doctors, the epidemiologists, and so forth, down to what Dr. Marcus has with the excess deaths is exactly what you would expect to see if there was a biological weapon being deployed, right? You first eliminate the defenses for it, so you can't prevent it. Then you put in each step was the move from the responses infection controls and the wrong things, which actually increase the spread of any disease. And then now you have all these excess deaths, and you got the stage 2 biological attack, which was the vaccines, which were way more lethal and destroyed everything. And then you ended up, interfering with elections, because if you start off something with treason, every aspect that comes as a result of it is part of that initial treason. So, I mean, it's a mess. Even without the doctors saying that it's a bioweapon for the vaccines, because it was ordered on the back of treasonous activity, they're done, right? And now they just have a
Yeah.
mountain more of evidence.
Well, I mean, I've interviewed Dr. Marcus many times on this particular channel. He really is. He's a top cancer specialist. He knows his subject inside out. And he has made it very clear that what you're just saying there is absolutely correct. Let me take a step back here for a second, because I know that we're going to go into a lot more in detail here, but let's just take a step back, because there will be people who will be watching this interview, and they might be vaccinated, or they might have loved ones, husbands, partners, wives, whatever, sons or daughters, mothers or fathers who were vaccinated, or who might be thinking about getting another vaccine. What if they're listening to this, Dale, and they're thinking, well, this sounds really awful, but surely the governments wouldn't do that to us. I mean, well, what do you think is the motivation for the globalists who are involved in this? That why do you think they decided to do this to humanity?
Well, I mean, some of it's money, but some of it actually doesn't make rational sense, right? Like, I mean, I tell my daughter, I'm like, if you could understand this, there would be a problem. Like, I mean, the only thing that I can think of, I'm a Christian, I think, is like Satanism. Like, I mean, they just want to destroy as many people as possible. And the crimes don't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason for it. It's just destruction seems to be the goal. Some people are
Mm-hmm.
motivated by money or whatever else, but it
Yeah.
seems like destroying people is the ultimate goal. It's
I mean,
insane.
as a Christian, then, and I also share your beliefs as far as that's concerned. Do you think that these people who have given themselves over to evil for money, power, wealth, whatever it might be, which is the usual, the typical thing that they crave, but do you think that ultimately, because we're made in God's image, that is partly why, or a large part of why, they hate humanity so much? Because what is in them sees God in us and absolutely wants to destroy God, but of course they can't. So they do the next best thing, and they destroy the likeness and the image of God. Would you say there's any truth to that?
Of course, like the devil hates God. So what are he's going to do? They're going to go after his children, right? This is why they destroy the families and all that stuff, because God, when he created humanity, replicated in humanity something he never did before. And this is why man was created in the image of God. And the devil hates that. So he's doing everything he can to wipe that off the face of the earth, and wants to have all of this, I mean, nonsense that we're seeing going along with the agenda, because not only did just COVID got pushed, but COVID was the vehicle for a lot of other things to be accelerated or introduced. Like, you look at this whole Soji filth that they're putting in, this, I mean, pedophilia, I mean, all
Mm-hmm.
that nonsense being pushed. And what you're seeing is a system of slavery being implemented on the people, because they're being put into involuntary servitude if you're forced to take the jobs. That's human trafficking. You're being pushed into a state of peonage or financial exploitation by criminal activity. That's also human trafficking. And then when you're broke, they can come in and steal your children,
Do you think,
defend
Dale?
your kids. Yeah.
So my apologies. I didn't mean to cut you off there. I was just going to say, do you think that they talk about the Great Reset, but actually, do you think that we're almost heading towards a great awakening? That the more they try to lock people down with things like CBDCs, smart cities, digital ID, that people are actually waking up to the point where they go, wait a minute, there's just something not normal about this. And do you think we're going to see more and more people waking up, or do you think that people are still largely asleep in the nations about what's really going on?
Well, I think we're going to see people waking up because the human will was never designed to be subjugated. And like, even though some people will try to comply to a certain point, there comes a point where there's a breaking point. And like Solomon said, it's better to be in the house of mourning than the house of feasting. When you get into the house of mourning, people will be like, wait a second, my life sucks. I need God. And they're going to start to pray. When that happens, oh, yes, God is going to wake people up in mass. And they're going to see something very, very special happen here. And these people will get dealt with. I believe that God's in control and that these guys are going to lose no matter what they do.
Yeah, they're not only going to lose, they're going to lose everything for eternity. These people that have given themselves over to evil and corruption, thinking that they're going to win against God, is just absolutely insane. But I think God does send them strong delusion. And of course, they have probably no idea exactly what's going to happen to them. We should really feel sorry for them, I guess. But I find that quite hard sometimes, I'll be honest with you, Dale. Um, in terms of Canada, please give us a bit of an upshot, because there was the famous prosecutions where they turned the state against people, froze people's bank accounts. And then, of course, recently that kind of got knocked back, and the Trudeau regime are appealing all of that. What's the general feeling in Canada at the moment? And is there any sort of likelihood, do you think, of Trudeau and not just Trudeau's particular party, but I think probably all the parliamentarians in the Canadian Parliament seem to be going along with it all, don't you? Don't you think? And do you think that any of them are starting to get worried or change their perspective, or are they still going straight down that particular path?
I think that some of them are getting worried. I think some of them are beginning to see the writing on the wall because the people are waking up with what's going on. I know that when we were here doing some of the protests here in Alberta with the axe attacks, we went and we threw in a petition for redress of grievances that outlined the treason and some of the unconstitutional measures that they were using. And then we went and put some of the politicians on notice and filed complaints with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Then we got a visit from one of the MLAs in Alberta and so forth. And so we got their attention, and they want to push back against the federal government because everybody knows in Canada that Ottawa hates Alberta, right? So we have sort of that common enemy, but people are realizing that Trudeau is committing treason and so forth. And they're actually coming out, even the CEC was talking about the foreign interference with the MPs and so forth, and they don't want to disclose the names. So
Yeah.
we know that there's a lot of filth going on, needs to be exposed.
Do you think there would ever come a point where you might get, like, you call them, you're not regions, you're not states, provinces? Do you think you would ever get the likes of the province of Alberta saying, do you know what, we're no longer taking your instructions because we think you've committed treason against our people here? What do you, I mean, is there an appetite for the likes of Alberta to secede from Canada itself, become an independent province? I mean, do you think that could ever happen?
There is an appetite for that, and it's a possibility if things don't change. I'm sure maybe several of the provinces out west would do that because they've always been traditionally ignored by Canada. I mean, like Ottawa, the centralized government. But I think that there would be a few things that need to happen first. But I think that we're probably going to have to get a lot more awareness and support of what's going on, because a vast majority of people are still unaware of what's going on, because Trudeau brags openly about paying $600 million for good press by controlling the press. So we have our work cut out for us in making sure that people are aware. But there is definitely an appetite that people are like, no, we want to leave.
Well, that's pretty interesting. I mean, I've heard this before, where Canadian tax dollars are being spent to fund the lying mainstream media in Canada to give Trudeau a glowing image, and of course there is a lot of people seeing through that. They're not stupid, but there are a lot of people that just read the news that's presented to them. They don't have the interest or the desire to seek out the real truth, and because you're not going to get that from the mainstream media. And it's the same in the UK, and it's the same in the States, pretty much. And it's in fact, it's the same pretty much wherever you find a globalist infiltrated government or parliament. This is their typical MO. What did you think when at the last meeting in Davos, Klaus Schwab and his entourage stood up and said the main focus for Davos this year, it's not curing world hunger, it's not stopping war, it's not anything good, it's misinformation and disinformation, because that was very quickly followed up by some very, very heavy hitting legislation in Canada. Bill, is it C60? Am I right in saying that?
I think it's C63 if I'm not mistaken, but I know what you're talking
C63.
about the
Yeah.
censorship. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're coming down with a lot of censorship in Canada. Canada's been ahead of like the United States by a long shot on censorship. And that's something that we really have to look at, because when you take away freedom of speech, you take away, like, you're taking away both religious and civil liberties at the same time. Because if you
Mhm.
can't communicate and criticize your government, or you can't, for example, as a Christian, go out and tell somebody about the good news about Jesus, then you've just restricted both at the same time. This is why it's like, even in the charter, it's the first actual element of the charter that's protected. And it's also in the First Amendment of the United States, because they understand the value of being able to speak freely, and they're shutting it down, and because they're going with dictatorship. And that's the only reason why you're censoring people, is because you don't want them to know the truth. And so we need to push back and use the grassroots and the independent media in order to circumvent this. This is hugely important.
I was speaking to somebody quite recently about some of these new policies that the Trudeau regime are putting out, the maid service being one of them. For anybody who doesn't know, that's not somebody in a pinafore coming and serving you your tea. This is state-sponsored euthanasia, where they are now actually trying. I don't know if they've done it yet. Maybe Dale, if you can let me know, but they're now looking to offer this state-sponsored euthanasia to children who are depressed or who are mentally handicapped, veterans, people that are vaccine injured have been offered this service. It's absolutely horrific. And the other thing that's horrific about it is that anybody that tries to talk somebody out of committing suicide effectively can go to prison for it. I find that shocking beyond belief, Dale. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's insane. It's state-sponsored murder, and you no longer have to have written consent. It can be verbal consent, so they can sit down and they can kill you, and then say, "Well, they wanted it." Well, who's going to say different after you're dead, right? Like,
Right.
this is insane. No government should have that right, and it's state-sponsored murder. This is all I can sit down and say, that it needs to be stopped and repealed. And this is why we need to make sure that we push this element of the treasonous activity, which will kind of tie into the letter that was sent by Congress on May 24th, asking for the events tied to the Winnipeg Biolab, which Trudeau was trying to shut down in Parliament and so forth. And they have a lot of connection to that, because that's the treasonous activity of the COVID response. And if he gets dealt with, all of those bills that they pass, they get repealed, because people who are committing treason to get into office, you can't commit a crime to pass bills, and they all get to go repealed. They all get repealed and they go away. And I think that he needs to be tried for crimes like you're having, what, the foreign uh, the foreign interference as
Mm-hmm.
ethics investigations in Parliament. No, that belongs in front of criminal judges to be prosecuted. That's treason. Another country controlling your elections and your affairs, that's treason. Like, I don't know why they're not prosecuting. Well, I mean, he's protecting himself, but it needs to be done.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the reason that he's still operating is because he does have the security state apparatus around him. For whatever reason, I mean, I have had conversations with former police officers, detectives, military personnel, special forces, some interesting people. But what would appear to be the case is that for some reason, there's elements within the RCMP and CSIS, which is the Canadian Secret Intelligence Service, that must know what's going on. They've got to know what's going on, right? That's what they're there for. So they must have a dossier on Trudeau. Why are they not presenting it? Why are they not having him removed from office and prosecuted for whatever crimes he's committed? And I think that the list would be pretty extensive, and not just him, but his sidekick, Chrystia Friedland, is also heavily involved in this. Both, of course, World Economic Forum members, Dale, aren't they? In fact, Chrystia Friedland is on the board of the World Economic Forum. She's a very senior player within that globalist structure. What is it, do you think, about the World Economic Forum that attracts so many of these people to it? Where you have the likes of Klaus Schwab, who heads all that, bragging about how he's penetrated the governments of the world. What do you think attracts them to it? Why do you think they join it?
I think it's probably for influence and power, right? Because this is really what it is. And they take attract certain kinds of people, and they try to get in, the best and the brightest to look like this is a good club. But then when they get there, it's really not. And some people are like, well, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to go up the chain, even if it means I have to do things they're morally wrong and even criminally wrong. And some people are like, no, I'm not doing that. And then they just walk away. But we have people that are clearly don't care about harming other people to get what they want. And so now we have these guys that are dictating what we're doing in our country, which they should never be, these unelected bureaucrats. And I think that they need to be dealt with. But Canada has a lot of top-down pressure. Like, I've dealt with some of the people in the RCMP, and in fact, when I first, some guys actually tortured me and my oldest daughter when we reported in 2020. But then I had guys that came in and took the information, and they started to process it and so forth. But then they moved this guy out who was a detachment commander, and they brought in another one to shut it down. And this was right before the protests in Alberta and in Ottawa, which had they brought that out, they would have been able to expose it. So you've got two factions inside of, the RCMP and CSIS, and it's like they're playing a cat and mouse game between the top-down pressure and the guys who want to do their jobs. And so, I mean, we need to start supporting the people who want to do their jobs, because they didn't sign up for becoming criminals and killing their fellow countrymen, right? And there's some people who
Yeah,
don't care.
there are some people who don't care, but I do believe that to be the case, where there are good police officers, there are good intelligence officers, not just in Canada with CSIS, but pretty much all over, who know what's happening. And there's going to come a point where they're going to have to pick their side, because this is escalating. And I want to bring I appreciate this interview, because it's actually quite interesting for me to get such detailed views and opinions from you, Dale. But we've got something coming up in November in the United States, which is not that far away from you guys. And it looks like there's a couple of things there that I sort of want your opinion on. First of all, do you think that we might be witnessing election interference with the Trump campaign again? Do you think that we might be seeing the start of something that's building that might prevent the election from taking place, in the form of H5N1 news that's coming out about the virus going from poultry into cattle and now into humans? Have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I look at this, and we're watching the same type of playbook inside of actually the report that I did. It's called The Engineering of Bioterrorism, Child Trafficking, Treason, and the Crime of Aggression Update. It's in the process of being published, but I have it inside of the petition packages. And I also had a book that I published in 2022 about this. From the CDC's own documents, they talk about H5N1 being weaponized in level 3 and 4 labs, right? And so, and all like Marburg, Ebola, and Hanipa, all these different things that you're hearing about potential pandemics, they've said that they are weaponizing these things for spread through aerosols. And so when I see that this is coming, it looks exactly what like it is another pandemic that is given out in time for an election to interfere. And this is they're using this, they're using the threat of war, they're using all of these different things as potential avenues because they don't want Trump and the Republicans who want to serve the interests of the people to take over because they know that they'll be held accountable. And I mean, you piss off America, and I mean, everybody knows how well that works, right?
Well, I'm glad they're our allies. You know, I like Americans, and I like the American people a lot. Same applies to Canada, of course. You know, you guys are different from the Americans, but you're also quite similar as well. There's far more that unites you than that which divides you. But I think that it's fair to say that we are almost in entering into, I would say, within maybe within the next 6 months, you know, as this year comes to a close, maybe just before 2025, it seems that there is a bit of a perfect storm forming. We've got major disruption taking taking place in the United States southern border with massive amounts of illegal immigration. This is happening in Canada. It's happening in the English Channel. Southern Ireland is off the charts as far as that's concerned. It is really bad there. France, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, even Australia and New Zealand, they're all being flooded out with massive scale illegal immigration. Now, there's nothing wrong with migration, natural migration, but this is a large scale illegal immigration, and it's destabilizing these sovereign countries and nations. So you've got that. You've also got the war drums beating roundly and soundly. I mean, in the UK, we've just had an election called on the 4th of July by a prime minister who's once again deeply in bed with the globalists. He is a World Economic Forum devotee. He is a cult member. And I do consider them to be like a cult. They are cult-like in their activities. They smile, but actually behind the smile is something very, very sinister. And he's called it because the word is within the military side of things here in the UK, and I can tell you this is definitely the case. He doesn't want to be a wartime prime minister, so he's making a bolt for the exit door. And I think he wants out. I think he doesn't want to be anywhere near it when the bombs start falling. But they've also just started to talk about conscription. 18-year-old men, young men and women in this country, are going to be called up to conscription. And if they don't agree to it, they're going to be arrested. Well, if anybody ever needed an indication of what was coming, it's that. When you start going down the route of conscription, it means you're getting ready for war. And I'm worried that we might see some kind of hot war escalate with the Ukraine situation and Russia. And, you know, they're playing a really insane game with him because he has a vast nuclear arsenal. He has said he will use it. And he means it. So, I mean, we could be looking at potentially another pandemic as well with this H5N1. I would like to ask you, I mean, I think probably I would know what your answer was if I said to you, well, what do you think of the last pandemic? You'd probably go, scamdemic. Well, I would as well. But actually, do you think the globalists are so sinister, dark, and wicked and evil that they actually might release something that was potentially deadly?
Yes, because the idea is to get rid of a lot of people, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's a small amount of the population. They want a manageable slave class, and it's impossible for them to control 8 billion people. So they
Mm-hmm.
need to cut down the numbers, get rid of the people that would resist, and then have a number that they could easily maintain their control over. And so they have to eliminate a large portion of the population. And they're going to go ahead into, for example, like the Christian countries, because they were the most likely to resist. Just look at what happened um, during the Dark Ages. They were killing Christians left, right, and center, but every one they killed, 10 more came in their place. So they want to get rid of these guys badly because they don't need to pick up arms and fight. They pray, and it changes minds, because you can't force somebody to change their mind with a weapon. You can persecute them, but then when they see that people see that happening, they're like, well, you know what? Maybe this guy was telling the truth, because nobody dies like that or suffers like that for a lie. And so they're trying to eradicate this so that they can control that. And this is why it goes back to these guys being worshiping the devil, because they hate Christianity badly.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. I mean, if let's go back to sort of maybe just about middle of sort of maybe 2019, because everybody can sort of remember where they were and what they were doing just before the pandemic. But how early did you notice? At what point did you say, "Hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense," or "This doesn't sound right"? When did you start to think this is just not right, as far as the COVID pandemic and the vaccinations and all that was concerned?
Well, right at the beginning, it seemed wrong the way that they began and brought it in. And then as I began to look at it even more, it made, like, it started to make more sense that this is completely wrong. Because I mean, we've had outbreaks of disease before. Never have we, locked down in this manner like this on a massive scale. And then some of the things they were saying, like they needed to enter into people's homes to properly quarantine you. I was like, you guys are nuts. That doesn't make any sense. Usually
Mm-hmm.
you send people home and they isolate themselves and they look after themselves. And then just as I began to look into the engineering controls and I saw what was going on, I was like, this is crime, right? Like, confirmed
Mm-hmm.
100% this was crime. The more I looked into it, the worse it became. And you could see beforehand with the economic policies, I knew that they were going to collapse the economy. They just needed the right event. And then COVID came, and I'm like, here's the event. And now you're watching them just like, this is like the end of World War II, where they're just printing money like crazy. And soon you're going to need wheelbarrows of whatever your currency is just to go and buy a loaf of bread, like they did at the end of World War II. This is exactly where we're heading. And this is where they're like, you'll own nothing and be happy, except we're not going to take that. Sorry.
Well, I mean, you're referencing the Weimar Republic, where inflation was just insane, and that's right. They actually were taking wheelbarrows of cash to buy one loaf of bread. That's how crazy it got, and it could get crazier. We're witnessing a lot of things happening, but certainly, what will probably most likely happen is if, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but it looks like they are preparing the H5N1 so-called pandemic in a way that could be brought into place if they think Trump's going to end up standing as president, because they will do anything to stop him from being elected. But here's the other thing as well. I mean, on the northern border of the United States is Canada. Canada appears to be heavily infiltrated by the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. They've been sending generals down to highly secure Canadian military bases. The generals of Canada, the commanders have been told, give them access to whatever they want. They've been coming in, they've been attending winter warfare classes. I mean, all sorts of different training programs. Now, the CCP is not an allied nation of Canada or the Canadian people. They might be allied to Justin Trudeau, but they're not allied to the Canadian people. But when the political authorities are coming in and ordering those troops to do that, there's something deeply wrong. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump does get reelected, that he doesn't, instead of looking at Russia or China so much, he might need to start looking at the northern border, because if Trudeau is still in there when Trump gains the presidency, and I believe he will, then he's going to have to do something about that, because Trudeau is not somebody that I think Trump could trust. And he's right on their border. And if they are in bed with the Chinese Communist Party, something would have to be done. Now, I'm not a Canadian, and of course I respect Canadians and people who think along these lines. But can you ever see a scenario where a newly elected President Trump might feel the need to cut come across the border, shall we say, and deal with Trudeau and his CCP backers? And if that happened, what do you think the population would think?
I mean, 100%, it's going to happen. And I think that steps are going to have to be taken before the 2024 election because they're preemptively trying to shut this down. And they've been working together on both sides of the border, like the three-letter agencies. This is why one of the things that, like I was referring to, the letter that the one of the congressional committees sent out on May 24th, asking about what was happening in connection to the Winnipeg biolabs and the CSIS report and the Director of National Intelligence that Trump put to oversee all of the other three-letter agencies for foreign interference in the United States election. Because you had Dominion voting machines, which came from Canada, and they're farmed out to the Chinese. So anywhere there's Dominion, you've got the CCP that has control of your elections. Now you also have I was working with Millie Weaver. She was a whistleblower in the States, and she actually had some of the videos of the three-letter agencies, people in there conspiring to take out Trump and saying outright that COVID was going to be used as a mechanism to take out Trump. And so now you've got the verbal conspiracy, and then the engineering side of it demonstrates the overt acts of them laying the groundwork to do this. And so we're literally in a war right now to begin with. It's just a biological one. And now they're taking out our supply lines and all of that sort of stuff. And Canada is being used as a staging ground, so to speak, in order to go after the United States. And they're flooded with a lot of hostile actors here in Canada that a lot of Canadians don't even want. So they're going to have to start shutting things down. And it is going to, like, I mean, they've literally done things to provoke war with the United States against the will of the Canadian people without using the parliament. And no one in Canada would justify a war against the United States. They're like, you're nuts, get lost, right? So he needs to be taken out 100%.
Well, it could happen. Of course, America may have its own problems, especially if the people in America think that the election has been stolen, dare I say again. I don't think they're going to wear it. So we could be seeing a period coming of vast disruption. We could be seeing disease pandemics. We could be seeing wars. We could be seeing great destabilization, and it's a tough thing to have to talk about and deal with because it's not very good news. It's not very good news, but ultimately there is good news, and I think we know how it ends, Dale. These people will cause a lot of damage, but ultimately they will be held to account. And I think perhaps we just need to hope and pray that there will be those within the security and police and indeed military fraternities that will step up when the time comes and do what needs to be done for the people, not for these dictators, not for these tin pot effeminate dictators like Trudeau. And really, that's the only thing I think that's keeping him in there. That and the CCP. There is deep infiltration going on in Canada. But, as I always find with these really fascinating interviews, they go past all too quickly, and we're running up to the last segment. So what I always like to do, Dale, is I always give our wonderful guests the last and final word. So I'd like to do that with you as well. So the next 2 or 3 minutes, please feel free to say whatever you'd like to. The floor is yours.
Yeah, like I said, like we've been doing work at the CARES project by helping people to file petitions for redress. We've outlined the treason. We've tied other people's work together. We filed in the state of Texas, Michigan, Colorado, and we're doing other states. We've also done it in the province of Alberta. We want people to come out and support these because these are going to help hold the legislators to account. And we need to hold their feet to the fires because they work for us. And the guys that want to do their jobs, we want to give them the backing that they need. And we got to work together, put aside our differences. Because if we don't do anything, we're going to have a problem. And this is where people need to start getting back to God. You need to pray. Like we were great countries because we worshiped God. When they brought in this communist agenda and so forth, then we started to have problems, right? And so now we need to go back to what made us great countries, and that is bringing God back into our homes. Men, we need to lead our families. We need to come back and we need to start to pray. We need to face this evil, stop sticking our heads in the sand and start doing something, right? Get behind somebody who's doing something, support the people, right? I mean, I got my daughter's going around really well in the States, going and talking to people, and she's 27, right? I mean, the younger guys, you guys can do stuff. Older guys, we need to do something too. Don't worry about your job, your car, and all that stuff, because you're not going to outwork the inflation that they're putting us under. It's not going to happen. So we just got to come together. I mean, really get this information out and share it. Let the people know. Talk to your elected officials. Talk to your law enforcement. Put them on notice. We've got an action plan. If anybody wants to look at, it's at dsrcaresconsulting.com. Click on the action plan for the CARES project. People can reach out on social media to me at DJS Richardson on X, Getter and True Social, or the CARES Project and so forth to reach us there. And I mean, just do something. That's really it. That's all I'm saying. Don't sit around, because we don't have the summer to wait for. We need to stop this now, because these guys are going to preemptively come out for us. So we should go after them first. That's really it. Thank you.
No, my absolute pleasure. And what I would ask you to do, Dale, is send me those links by DM, and that way I can put them into the actual main body of the tweet when it goes out. I think a lot of people will feel very much in agreement with what you're talking about. And I would just like to say a huge thank you for coming on. I would very much like to welcome you back as a guest to the channel, because you've got a very sort of precise way of speaking, and a very calm and methodical way of expressing yourself. And I think that's really important when we're trying to wake people up and get that message out. So I'd love to have you back on the channel. Is that something you think you could do?
Well, absolutely. I come back and talk anytime.
All right, good stuff. Well, look, thanks very much indeed, Dylan. Thank you to all the people who are out there listening to this as well. It takes a lot of courage to come on the show like this and talk about these types of issues. Some of it's quite dark stuff, but you know something? Your help and your support for our great guests and for this particular channel as well is greatly appreciated. I very much do appreciate your comments and your suggestions, and also the fact that you're liking and subscribing and sharing this content, and I am grateful. So thank you one and all for all of that, and thank you once again, Dale. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I look forward to seeing you again really soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, folks, this has been another good show, and I'm looking forward to seeing Dale again. But in the meantime, this is Jim Ferguson. We'll speak soon. Take care for now. Bye-bye.